So thank you for joining us here. This is our Facebook Live Town Hall. It is Friday, May 7th. Just wanted to really say that we had really good feedback from our last town hall that we had and our annual meeting and then our other videos that we've been putting out. So we're really wanting to take this as an opportunity to continue to produce video content, to be able to ask or answer questions for our consumer members, and really just be able to continue to provide dialogue about what's going on in our community. And one of the topics that we have really that makes good sense to talk about today is our solar projects that have been going on. So we have two solar projects that are happening over in both in Crawford County and over in Neosho County. These are they are constructed and they are in the commissioning project process right now. So each solar farm is about 7 acres worth of solar panels. They're on a single axis tilt. So what that means is in the morning, they're facing east, and in the evening, they're facing west. And that really maximizes the amount of energy being produced, no matter which direction the sun is actually at in the sky. So on a sunny day, like as of yesterday morning, by 7 o'clock in the morning, a little bit after, we were at peak output from that solar panels, and it continued peak all day long up until a little bit before 6 p.m. It's really a good way to help be able to reduce consumption on other carbon-based fuels, but really it also helps us to be able to provide rate stability going forward. So we do have some questions that were sent to us in advance, and so I'm going to start answering those here. But if you have any questions as we go through this, please send them in the chat here on Facebook, and we'll be able to answer them as we go through. So one of the first questions, really I thought it made sense to go off, or to start with here, is what is Heartland's position on solar energy? Well, obviously, since we're putting in solar panels, our position on solar energy is that if it makes sense for the individual consumer, in our case, if it makes sense for our consumers here at Heartland, then it makes sense to be able to do. So really, we are focused on providing power to rural life all throughout, so powering rural lifestyles. So when we are looking at the specific goals of what our intentions are here at Heartland, it is different than what maybe individual consumer members might be looking at. But really, we're trying to provide rate stability for many years to come for all of our consumer members. So the decision to move ahead with solar for Heartland itself and the board of directors was really a financial decision. So we don't want to be able to provide electricity to our consumer members at a more expensive cost just by us producing it here locally than if we would have bought it from the larger electric grid. And so we really are focusing on the peak reduction component of this, because that 3 to 6 p.m. time frame in July and August, when it's really hot outside and we hit those peak alerts, that's really when most of the savings from the system are going to be happening. So we're really focusing on that. So locally produced renewable energy that's from a non-carbon based source and is locally grown right here is just a good byproduct of that. And so we will continue to evaluate different technologies and even maybe potentially add more solar going forward if those projects continue to make sense for us and for our consumer members. So you might be asking yourself, are solar panels good for the individual consumer member? And I really think that that's a very individualized question, and my good engineering answer is it depends. So it depends upon what your goals are, it depends upon what your objectives are, and does it make sense for you to be putting those in? Really, if you want to get the most bang for the buck out of installing solar electricity or solar panels to use for electricity, you need to use the electricity as it is being produced. So if you are not home during the day when you're getting peak output, if you are using most of your electricity in the evening time, that is not going to give you the most benefit from doing solar. For us, I just told you our peak starts at about 7 in the morning and it finishes off at 6 p.m. And if you're anything like me, that's about the hours that I'm either chasing my kids around to activities or I'm at work. So it doesn't make as much sense for me at my home to be able to do that. If you go to our website, we have a very comprehensive, frequently asked questions, really focusing on wind and solar alone. We put a lot of time and effort into answering a lot of questions that our consumer members have. So please head over to our website, use that as a resource to be able to start answering some of those questions on whether it makes sense for you or not. And if you have any questions that aren't on there or something more specific or it makes you have some additional questions, please call into the office. We have very good subject matter experts here at Heartland, and we would love to be able to help you walk through everything from sizing of the system to maximizing the return on investment for you at your individual house. So please do call in if you have additional questions. One of the other questions that we had is, why is Heartland pursuing solar energy and not wind energy? So really, if we want to talk about it, it really makes more sense to really focus on what is Heartland as a distribution electric cooperative, what is Kansas Electric Power Cooperative as our generation and transmission company. So Doug, if you want to flip over to the picture, this is up on our website. If you go to the outage center portion of our website, this picture is going to be there if you want to make reference to it later. What it does is it shows where the transmission comes into us, and then where us as a distribution co-op then distribute that power out to the individual consumer members. So we are running it out to the end user, the homes, the businesses, the farms, the irrigation pivots, any of those pieces. That's what we are selling all the electricity to. And we buy it from the bulk grid, where our generation transmission company, or transmission cooperative, Kepco, Kansas Electric Power Cooperatives, helps make sure that the generation being purchased is transmitted to us through the transmission lines, and then us as a distribution co-op goes out from there and sells it to everybody else. So when we are looking at our forward-thinking electric cooperative that us as Heartland is one of the 16 member owners of, on behalf of our member owners, they're forward-thinking, and they really put a 15% carve-out of all electricity that is being able to be consumed or purchased. So Doug put a pie chart up on the screen, and it is 85% of the resources that we purchase has to be coming from Kepco. 10% can come from any sort of generation, and currently we use diesel generators for that, and then we have a 5% carve out just for solar itself. And so when we have a carve out for solar at 5%, it makes sense for us to make sure that the business case is there to make a solar investment for our members on behalf of if it's going to provide stable electric rates going forward. And so we're really focusing on the next 25 plus years that the solar project is going to be in place. So if you look at the power supply mix that we have from March, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit here, Doug, but if you go to the power supply mix that we had from March, you can see that of the power that we sold to our consumer members in March, about 32% was nuclear, 27.5% was hydro, 17.6% was coal, 5.3% was oil and gas, 17.2% was wind, small portion of solar and other. So when we're looking at the overall mix, solar isn't a large component of it, and wind is actually a bigger component of our renewable resources that we're providing to our memberships. But us as Heartland, we don't have any contracts for wind, but instead we're purchasing it through the Southwest Power Pool through our generation transmission company, Kepco. So we do provide winds to our members, just we don't own those resources, or we don't have contracts for those resources. And really, if you think about the wind farms that have gone in our region, they're sized at the size where we can't really take the output out of there very easily, because it is such a large wind farm. We don't have the local need for it, and also our contracts with Kepco doesn't really allow for that either. But when we really focus on solar by itself, us at Heartland, we did exactly what we asked our consumer members to do. When we ask you to put in, or when people are interested in putting in solar, we ask you to properly size it so that you use the electricity that's producing when it's being produced. So us at Heartland, we made sure that we picked the proper locations, that any output from that solar was going to be consumed when the sun was shining, and we didn't have to send anything back. So we are doing exactly what we're asking you to do. We properly sized the solar so that it had the maximum benefit from that. And really, what is produced locally is consumed locally, and that really makes the cost offset be exactly what we want. When you're thinking about the larger, grander wind system that's out there right now, or even as we shift from carbon-based fuels to more renewables, or getting rid of central power stations, the transmission infrastructure really has to change pretty significantly to make that happen. So when we are looking at resources, whether it's in Kansas or across the Southwest Power Pool or into other parts of the country, costs are changing because we're changing where the generation is coming from. So the more locally produced energy that we can have, the less transmission reliance we'll have as well. So if we're thinking about the transmission builds and we're talking about wind and solar, we're really talking also about a comprehensive energy plan for the state of Kansas. And I think that that's a very key component that came out of the Kansas legislature's studies on electric rates that has happened. They say we need to have a comprehensive energy plan. We need to look at adding renewables, and we need to look at the transmission builds that are going on. And so really we want to encourage the Kansas legislature to look at doing that energy plan and include electric co-ops into that conversation so that we can make sure that we're spurring economic development, we're keeping electric rates low, and ultimately we're providing stable electric rates for our consumer members with reliable electricity moving forward. So that's a very long-winded answer to really say we installed solar because we have a 5% carve-out, and we didn't install wind because it doesn't make sense for us, but we're still providing electricity to you, and really we're focused on rate stability going forward. So one of the other questions that we had was, does Heartland receive any direct financial benefit directly from the state or federal government for the project, such as tax credits, lower tax rates, forgivable or low interest rate loans, subsidies, or any other benefit? So if you remember, as an electric cooperative, we're actually organized as a 501c12 with the IRS, so that means we're a not-for-profit organization. We don't pay any federal income tax because of the work that we do as a not-for-profit. So when we start looking at doing a solar project, there's something called an investment tax credit. And these investment tax credits, or ITCs, are a way to be able to spur the development of renewables, and you have to be a for-profit entity to take advantage of the investment tax credits. So when we look at the Kansas Sun Power program, where Heartland partnered with 11 other co-ops in the state of Kansas to install over 20 megawatts worth of solar, so that's about 20 of the systems that we're putting in. Heartland will have about 2 of those, or will have 2. We had to go and find a third party to actually use those tax credits or those tax incentives so that automatically we didn't pay 26% more for our project than we would have if we bought it and owned it and operated it ourselves. So instead, we had Today's Power Incorporated. They're actually a cooperatively owned subsidiary of Arkansas Electric Cooperatives. And so they are taking the tax credits for that to help us reduce the cost of the solar by 26%. And those tax savings are built into the power purchase agreement that we have in place with them. And we're always looking for ways to provide more stable electric rates going forward. And there's been an ongoing discussion recently in Washington, D.C., about how do not-for-profits also take advantage of any federal tax incentives that are out there. And so we are advocating to our Kansas legislature, not for incentives, but if incentives are available, that we would have access to a direct pay program instead of relying on a third party to own and operate assets when it might make more sense for us in Kansas to own and operate it. Believe it or not, we are a technologically advanced business running here in Kansas, and being able to use those tax credits are going to be to the benefit of our consumer members in a direct pay method if that option was available. And what we're looking at also is battery storage, electric vehicle charging, other distributed generation resources. And really, if it's good for our consumer members, for all consumer members, it's good for the electric co-op as well. So other questions that we had were really more focused on other things going on at the cooperative as well. One of them is, why is the service availability charge so high? So we actually get this question quite frequently from people calling in and talking on the phone, emailing us, but this is one of the submitted questions. So if you think about the electric industry in general, we're going through kind of a shift in how things have been done in the past. So in the past, people would, back in the 1930s and 1940s, they needed electricity to really be able to handle growing their farm, growing their businesses, and expanding and really promoting rural lifestyle. And now as people are adding renewable energy or they're using less energy out there, we're needing to shift our business model around a little bit too. And so the way that we are able to do this with the service availability charge is say, okay, what's the cost? What are the fixed costs for Heartland to run our business that if we sold 0 kilowatt hours as an electric cooperative, how do we pay for our fixed costs that are there? And that's really what the service availability fee is. And over the past many years, it's been artificially low. And we've been collecting more money on the kilowatt hours sold, so the energy you consume, what's spinning that electric meter. We've been collecting money on those kilowatt hours and putting them toward fixed costs. So if you're looking at like how do you run a successful business as things are changing, you need to be able to put your fixed costs in where you're going to get fixed income in place. with that. So the service availability charge basically lets it be that we can promote renewable energies. We can be able to promote energy efficiency. We can talk about how if we sell 0 kilowatt hours and we're providing members with access to energy instead of selling them electricity, that's really giving us options to be able to do that while still covering all of our costs that are there. So when we do our cost of service study, so the cost of service study is where you go and say, okay, where do all the costs of the cooperative come into place? Is it from the peak demand during the middle of the summer? Is it from the poles and wires in the ground? Is it from selling of electricity? Where are the costs coming from? It's an industry standard that happens. Heartland is currently going through a cost of service study right now. And historically, we haven't been charging what the cost of service is on the service availability charge. So it's been artificially low, as I mentioned. So we are looking at ways to be able to increase that so we can overall decrease the cost of the kilowatt hours or the electricity by itself. So I was talking to some people here a couple of days ago, and they were asking what's the difference between an investor-owned utility and what's the difference between a rural electric cooperative. And I was sitting, and we were having lunch, and it was downtown outside, and I pointed to the buildings, and I said, okay, think about this area right here. You have on this block 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 business fronts in one block. And that at Heartland is 3 times more meters in 1/2 of a city block as we serve in 1 mile of power lines. So if you're thinking about density of meters and how much infrastructure do you need to have in place in order to serve an electric meter, the economic game in a city is significantly different than in rural Kansas, and we understand that. So we do get loans from USDA's Rural Utility Services, which are lower interest rate loans than if we got a normal business loan someplace else. So we do have other mechanisms in place in order to help keep our costs lower, and that also helps keep our service availability charge lower. But we also have to be able to make sure that those poles and wires that are installed, we are able to keep in good working order. We have good, strong, reliable electricity for whatever Mother Nature throws our direction. And also that we are providing safe electricity as well. And so when we put poles and wires in today, we don't want the ratepayers of today to pay 100% for those, because those poles and wires are going to be in the ground or in the air for 30 plus years. So we need to make sure that we're covering costs, being able to pay our debt on those poles and wires so people have access to electricity that's needed. But really, our service availability charge makes us be able to do that, whether we sell any kilowatt hours or not. So kind of tied to that service availability charge question was, why don't you encourage new customers, or why don't you discourage them that are coming in? And so it was really tied back to the service availability charge, I believe, in this question, saying that if we have a higher service availability charge, is that something that people are going to not join us as an electric cooperative? And so, again, kind of tied back to some of my answers on the last one. And from a business perspective, you want to put your fixed income based on where your fixed costs are, and a variable income should not be covering what a fixed cost is. So if you think about electricity year to year, think of hot summers or really cold winters. We're using more electricity. The variability of electricity that's there, if we're covering those fixed costs on there, we'll have large swings in whether we're able to cover the bills or not, or how much money is coming in. So we might artificially have to raise prices in order to cover those years when not a lot of electricity is coming in. So we aren't trying to discourage anything, but instead we're trying to put those costs there so we can keep the overall cost of the commodity or the electricity lower as well. And again, this helps us promote energy efficiency, energy conservation, promote renewable resources, and really provide members with access to electricity instead of just trying to sell them a product. And ultimately, if people need our product, we're here to sell it to them. But if they don't need it, we'll be here whenever they do need it. One of the other questions we had recently was, why do members have to pay for line extensions? So this would be if we have a member that is looking to put in a brand new home. They're not moving into a pre-existing home, but they need to build line going down the road. So my question to them my question to members is, okay, if there is a hunting cabin going in, it's 2 miles away from any other electric service we have, is it fair for the rest of the consumer members of the electric co-op to pay for that line extension to that cabin that's maybe used 2 or 3 weekends a year? And most people will say, no, absolutely. I don't want to pay for somebody else to run electric, and I'm not going to see any benefit out of it. So we're trying to put the costs where the cost came from and be fair to the rest of the electric members at the same time. So even if it's a residential home and you're building across the road, there's going to be a little bit of a cost with that. But we also provide credits to members based on what type of electric service they're putting in. If it's a new home, if it's a shop, if you put in an air source heat pump, it's going to be a little bit different, or if it's all electric. And so if you call into the office, I really ask that you just ask some of our subject matter experts how we charge for line extensions, how we go through the process. And we're just trying to make sure that we are fair to all consumer members, and we're not artificially making some members or all the rest of the members pay more for electricity than we would have otherwise. So one of the other things that I wanted to be able to talk about today is electric rates going forward, electric rate studies, kind of where the cost drivers are from all this. So if you talk about solar and we talk about cost of service and we talk about line extensions, really we're talking about timing of the use of electricity. And so as the timing of electric is used, so for instance, I'm just going to go back to an example I used a couple of years ago at an annual meeting slide. An electric vehicle plugged in any hour of the year other than the 2 peak hours of the year might cost about $3 to charge the electric vehicle. If it's plugged in at the wrong time period and it hits the peak, it might cost the cooperative $810 for the same electric vehicle plugged in. So it's all about timing. And so when we talk about solar, it's all about timing. Is the power being produced when it's going to be able to be consumed? When we talk about our Peak Savers program, it's all about making sure that people are able to conserve electricity going forward. And it's not really about the electricity usage itself. It's not about the energy. It's just saying, let's reduce our peak because that helps us reduce other costs. So the question that we'll have for our consumer members here over the next year or year and a half is, if there are options available to change when you use electricity to be able to help you save money and then in turn save the cooperative money at the same rate, is that something that you're willing to make a couple of lifestyle changes to be able to do that, to unlock that savings on your electric bill? When we do a flat kilowatt hour charge, we're taking all of these peak charges, whether somebody plugs in their electric vehicle and it costs us $800, or whether they plug it in off-peak and it's only costing us $3. We have to put that in so that we average everything out to make sure that at the end of the year we're covering our costs with where they're at. So if we can change how we charge for electricity and encourage you as consumer members to make lifestyle changes if you so choose to do so, and you can save money on your electric bill, is that something you're willing to do? And we don't want to do anything that's bad for our membership. We want to have conversations with our members about this. And over the next couple of months, we're going to be starting to look at adding focus groups to our consumer members and asking some of them to come in each one of our 4 director districts and just have a conversation saying, okay, here's some thoughts we have on how we could build electric rates going forward to help provide more stable electric rates, be able to provide savings for members if they so choose to do so. But what can you understand? What can you follow? We don't want to make it complicated, but what we want to do is be able to provide members with a way to save electricity. So some of this might be just delaying when you use electricity. So turning on your electric clothes dryer a little bit later in the evening, or turning it on during the day, running your dishwasher at different times. If you have like center pivot irrigation, running it at a different time, or if people start getting electric vehicles, I know we do have consumer members out there that do have electric vehicles. If they don't plug them in right when they get home, or they put it into the computer of the car to start charging later in the evening and not at 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. at night, those are little things that really don't impact members' lives too much, but instead could really greatly save them money and us as a cooperative money in turn. Last piece that I had on here, just looking to see if I have any questions. I don't think I see anything as of right now coming in. Last little piece I want to talk about as we're talking about timing of electric is the Peak Savers program. So this has been a very successful program for our consumer members over the last few years. And as we are looking at changing electric rates, we are going to be doing that sometime into 2022 as far as timing, if it makes sense for our consumer members. But as we go into 2021, this summer, Peak Savers is definitely back on. So you'll be getting some publications from us if you've been a peak saver in the past, but really every time we call a peak during the summer in July and August, for every kilowatt you reduce your consumption, we'll pay you $1. So that's a very good incentive in order for you to slightly change what you're doing at home, maybe grill that night instead of using your electric oven, or delaying when you start your clothes dryer, or some people even flip on their generators at home in order to completely cut off the grid during those hours because they know that they're going to more than pay for the propane or the diesel that they were using rather than being able to, they'll save more money on that than if they would have been paying for the electricity. And so we'll be going through, and in July and August, usually it's about 6 times per year that we do a peak notification. Louis giving me the head nod. About 6 times per year, we send out a peak notification, 3 to 6 p.m. at night. Shift your electric usage away from that in the months of July and August, and you have the opportunity to get money back from the cooperative. And it helps us save money as well, and that's how we're able to fund that. And so with that also, I want to emphasize the Smart Hub app. We're going to be trying to use that this summer for notifications for members as well. So if you haven't seen Smart Hub yet, not only can you see electric usage, but you can also get outage notifications from when you're out of power or estimated times of restoral, and then even get notices when power is restored. Correct, Louis? Yep, shaking his head, yes. And if you go to our website, you can enroll on there, or you can also call into the office. For the Peak Savers program, we'll be sending out some notifications, but we'll be putting that on our website, getting a login, or getting some enrollment information out there. We've had a lot of consumer members take advantage of this in the past and really be able to save some money. And so if you aren't signed up for that and want to learn more, we'll be having the link up on the website here momentarily, sometime early next week, and then we'll be rolling out more information as we go as well. So not seeing any more questions come in, and we're just a couple minutes till the end of our time. But I really want to thank everybody for joining us today, whether it's just for a short period of time or whether you forward it through live or watching this afterward. Hopefully the video format works well for you. It's a good way for us to, again, talk about what's going on in our communities, talk about what's going on at your electric cooperative, and it's just another way for us to connect with you so that you know that your cooperative cares and that we're here to make sure that we are promoting stable electricity, reliable electricity, and safe electricity in everything we do. So stay safe, stay healthy, and have a great weekend. Thank you.